Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our special guest. I'm Julie Holcomb. I teach photography in the Art and Art History department. The department is pleased to present Richard Haynes, who came all the way across campus. He works in the admissions office for diversity here at UNH. He's been here 16 years. And he teaches and educates about diversity, equity, and inclusion. He has served in the U.S. Air Force during the Vietnam period. He is also recently was a fellow at the Currier Museum of Art. His most notable exhibition to date, which was last year, beginning of January. It was called Whispering Quilts, where in a series of drawings he tells the story of an enslaved family's dangerous journey along the Underground Railroad, from southern plantation to freedom in Canada. The narratives entail hope, struggle, and triumph based on historic accounts. His use of brilliant colors suggests that joy can be found even in horrific circumstances. He was recently featured on PBS and has an upcoming exhibition at Colby Sawyer, the forthcoming 2002 year, February 7th to May 10th, 2022. He's received numerous awards and accomplishments. Most notable recently would be Individual Artist Fellowship of New Hampshire State Council on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts, and also received Outstanding Achievement Award for the CBS Educational and Professional Publishing. He grew up in South Carolina, now lives in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he received his Master of Fine Arts degree from Pratt Institute in New York City. And we're so delighted that you're here to share your work with us.
Thank you very much. So this is a new instrument around my neck. I normally have a lapel mic, but hopefully everyone can hear me. All right. So my name is Richard Haynes. I'd like to take you on a journey of life, struggle, gaining strength, and freedom through the power of art. I call myself a cultural keeper, a culture maker. And I'll begin to break that down, what that really means to you as I go through my talk. And where that came from, the whole idea of culture keeper, culture maker, was I had to go to hell and come back. In New York, I was an extremely successful photographer. I mean, I was making lots of money. My colleagues were so happy when I left. My fellow photographer colleagues were so happy when I left. And I was stationed here in New Hampshire in 1968, an 18-year-old kid up to about 20 years old before I went overseas. And when I got out of the military, I decided this was going to be a wonderful place to stay, but to come and live and raise a family. But it was hard at the first 3 years of it. And it literally drove me to hell. It made me wanting to almost end my life. But what happened in coming out of that struggle, I really grew from it, right? When we are struggling, we have to remain focused because it's only but a moment. And yes, that moment could seem like a year, or seem like 3 years to me, but you just keep pushing through it. It's where my art was truly discovered, in that struggle. Let's go back all the way to 1949. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, in the deep South, to two extraordinary parents. But unfortunately, neither one of them had education. You get up in the morning and you get up, and the thing you were doing is you were picking harvest for the wealthiest people in the nation. parents had a 6th grade education, my dad. My mother had an 8th grade education. And the only thing they could do was either be the help or work the fields, picking the harvest for the wealthiest people in the nation. And so this is during the African-American migration. They decided, you know what? We've got to leave. The Industrial Revolution is happening in the North. It's time to go and get a new job and more money. Because down there in the Deep South, they were only making $900 to $1,000 a year. We decided, got it on 1954 green Ford, and up 95 North, we're coming to New York. Mom sent me these beautiful note cards of Midtown Manhattan. So I'm thinking, little 9-year-old boy, I'm going to live in Midtown Manhattan. And when that car came out of Lincoln Tunnel and started rolling and rolling and rolling, Midtown Manhattan was absolutely beautiful, but the car kept rolling and Midtown Manhattan went over the horizon line and we arrived in Harlem, 127th Street. I stepped out of that car. It was like Europe, 1930s. Bombed out, burnt out, rats, roaches, and heroin addicts. Mom, you promised me you were going to bring me someplace better. Grandma had a way of getting my attention. She'd pull on my ear and lift my chin up and said, son, better only if you make it better. Better for them. They didn't have to get up in the morning and get in that pesticide fields. Snakes and bees and sun. They were now cleaning hotels. That's better. But for me, no, it wasn't better. We moved from place to place, running away from heroin-addicted communities, roach heroin-affected apartments, until we finally arrived in the Bronx. Poverty follows you when you have no education. Now we arrived in the Bronx, it was pretty good, but then it turned out to be the South Bronx. By then, I'm now 13 years old. Still in the middle of the civil rights movement. 13 years old when I started Alexander Berger Junior High School. I found my angel. Little teeth Jewish woman, Mrs. Miramace Powers, my homeroom teacher, and my art teacher. She saw something in me I could not see in myself. She says, Richard, you're a great artist. I'm only 13 years old. How am I a great artist? She says, before I leave this planet, you are going to be a great American artist. Okay, I'll accept it. This woman was so fabulous. On the weekend, she would literally take me out of the Bronx and take me into Westchester, Mount Vernon, New York. We'd work in the gardens, sketching flowers, planting flowers. Saturday morning, we'd wake up and we're either in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Cooper Hewitt, the Whitney, the Modern Art, the Guggenheim, and all of them, wherever it was, Madison Avenue, going to galleries. She would sit me down and she would talk to me about lines and shapes and forms and color. And she would talk to me about the history of the Romans and the Mayans and the Greeks. This woman made sure that I got into a special high school in New York City, the High School of Art and Design. 57th Street and 2nd Avenue. If there are any art connoisseurs in here, you know that is Mecca. But I didn't understand that. I was a high school, inner city kid. Went into that art school every day, and I fell in love with photography and drawing and painting and sculpturing. I forgot math, science, foreign language, social science, and English was important. She would ask me, how are you doing on the weekends when we'd be in the museum? And I said, Mrs. Powers, I'm doing fine. I was doing fine in art and, lighting and whatever else, all the art programs, but I wasn't doing fine in the math, science, foreign language, social science, and English. 4 years happened real quick like. was time to go to Cooper Union and Pratt Institute and the School of Visual Arts, but I didn't have the GPA. 6 months later, drafted off into the Vietnam War, returned home 4 years later. And that woman met me at the airport and said, "Are you ready to finish your education now?" She says, "In order to be a serious artist, you need an MFA. I had just gotten through the military. You can get through the military and get through that boot camp, you can do anything in life." I became an academic warrior. Now I had new Mrs. Powers had already passed. I had new teachers: Bill Sellers, Ursula Myers, Jim Huntington, Theo Strepolopoulos. These people were serious about art. This is my BFA program at Lehman College. They were serious. I began to listen. At the same time, I'm dealing with those core courses at the same time. But it was the art course that kept me interested in staying in college. But I became an academic warrior because the community I had left had even gotten worse. And no way in the world, I just saw the world, no way in the world I was going to live like this. The only way out of this, as Mrs. Miriam Powers said to me, education will give you freedom and opportunities. And I got focus. I went to school full-time, worked full-time for 6 years and got my Master's of Fine Arts degree from Pratt Institute. Then my life began. But as I went to college, I'm thinking, oh, I can't wait to get into the galleries and the museums. Well, that didn't work. So I got out. My first job was picture buyer for CBS television. Then I became a picture producer. Then I became staff photographer. Then I opened up my own business for 16 years, Haynes Images, photographically illustrating textbooks for a living. Digital photography came in. My life changed. It was like, I don't like it. Sorry, digital photographers. I'm still shooting film, by the way. So my life changed. But I was making lots of money. And I decided I'm going to move to New Hampshire. I was here as a kid. I loved it. It didn't work. Financially, it did not work for me. I became so poor. I decided I'm going to end my life. But this is where the spiritual awakening came. I literally found myself through a spiritual force, a divine force. And I said to that divine force, listen, if I can get through this, I promise you that my whole life, art career, will be yours forever. And that was my journey. All along, I learned how to use the craft, whether it was photography or drawing or whatever, printmaking, clay. I learned the craft. I fell in love with the craft. But at that spiritual awakening is when I found how important art truly can be. What would we not know about the prehistoric men and women had the artists not put the work on the wall? The anthropologists, sociologists, archaeologists all go in and unearth that work, and culturally, they found some awesome things about those people. Egyptians, Romans, Mayans, and Greeks, as they unearthed that work, these people found out some extraordinary things about these various cultures. And so what I decided, what I was going to do with my craft, is paint the story of the faceless people in our society. Because for 3 years, I was so poor and I was faceless. Let me be a voice to these people. So I dubbed myself culture keeper, culture maker. Artists, you are important people to this society. Imagine going to a movie this weekend. And if that director and writer have done their best, they could have changed the world when you walk out of there. I know my world changed when I walked out of, there was this horror movie. What was the name of it? I can't remember. It was just a horrible movie. I walked out of there and I went, oh my God, that was so scary. Never went to a horror movie there afterwards. I mean, just never. But then you walk in and see some of the Spike Lee films, like Malcolm X, and you look at that stuff, and it's amazing what you've learned. You go into the Met on a Saturday and just walk through various rooms. It's amazing what you can truly learn. So I decided what I'm going to do is I am going to paint my life from beginning to where we are today. So I have to go all the way back, because what caused me not to really like myself in those 3 years of living in New Hampshire, I was a man of color. And what does that mean? What does that mean? I have to discover it for myself, because I don't believe that I really ever really was taught it. You come to my house now, my kids are saying, my God, Dad, how many more books are you going to read? Well, everything I paint, I've got to research it first. So I had to get all kinds of American history books and look at African American history. And then I began to paint the images. Everything I do, all research before I paint it. So important to me. So then I started painting, because my divine spirit had delivered me. Finally, I got a job back doing what I love doing, photographing and illustrating textbooks. Pearson Education hired me, and I'm starting to work and getting my income back. But I didn't get sucked in by income, because I realized there are a lot more people out there who are struggling. And I have to keep my faith moving forward. So as I began to think about what am I going to paint first, I started painting stories of slavery first. So here, I don't know why it's moving, but first image I started painting, I started researching and reading first. This is a story about a 13-year-old girl who were literally molested at the age of 13, had her child, but the mistress found out that the child, that was her husband's child. The child was immediately sold into slavery. And in sold into slavery, this young girl was still on this plantation. She gets married on this plantation, and she's causing a lot of disturbance on this plantation. The master dislikes it. The master, she's now married and has 4 kids, 3 kids with a husband. She's pulled out of her house one night and literally stripped naked, lynched in a tree by her wrist, and bullwhipped 45 times for death. She's cut down. She does not die. She decides, I am going to escape into freedom. The elders on the campus had this hidden message in quilts, stitched into quilts, to help them on their journey. This particular image is called the flying geese. So as these people are traveling, there are going to be people who are going to drape these quilts either over a window, over a porch railing, to let them know this is a safe house, and to let them know, follow the sounds of the geese. The book is called Hidden in Plain View by Professor Jacqueline Tobin from University of Colorado. So I'm looking at all of her patterns, and I said, oh my goodness, I love the patterns. How can I include a family in this pattern? And that's what I began to do. This one is called Drunkard's Path. They're on their journey into freedom. This particular pattern says, when you see it draped over the farm, window, door, or the railing, means the slave hunters were here. Do not come to the house. Double back, stay on the same path to confuse the dogs, and hunters just remain in the woods until we think it's safe. This one is called Drunkard's Path. We want to talk a little bit more, too, about how this craft is all done. By the way, this family is literally brought into my studio. I have a photographic studio at home. Brought into the studio. I've already thought out what the image and what the family should look like. And I photographed the family having the pattern. I'm going to show you probably before the end of this what this looks like. All right? Then the next one. There's 10 of these patterns. You're not going to see them all, but there are 10 of these patterns. This one is called Crossroads. And crossroads means you're just about over the Ohio River. And as you get over the Ohio River, it means you're going to be safe. You don't have to worry about hunters anymore. Look at the bold, bright colors in these pieces. Bold, bright colors come from that divine connection again. Even when things look gloomy and dark and unbelievably you're not going to make it, I am going to suggest you have joy anyhow. There is joy at the other end of this tunnel. This one is bow tie. This one suggests you got to dress up now. You can't look like you're a slave or been running through the forest and all tattered and muddy anymore. You have to look like you are a part of this neighborhood. This one is shoe fly. In the graveyard, which also means hunters generally do not go in graveyards or churches to hunt slaves. So this is a sacred place. The Frederick Douglass, the Harriet Tubman will come and give you a change of clothes and food. Then I decided there's another story to tell. I don't know why it's doing that. Another story to tell. The African-American family in this country is considered a broken family. My family wasn't broken. My family was extraordinary. They were loving, they were kind, they were supportive. They worked hard in order to help us get through what we got to. So I needed to tell that story as well. What does that story look like? This was us in the Deep South in Charleston. Proud of who we were. Unfortunately, we didn't have the education that we needed to live more prosperously, but we were still proud people. So I'm telling a story of being proud about who you are. I had to think about that, because don't forget, I was at a point in life that I wanted to end it. This is horrible. So I had to make sure that when I painted it, that there were positive images, that when the archaeologists, sociologists, anthropologists come and unearth my work, they're going to see something different. Different community painted these kinds of images about us. So if we look at the vaudeville images of African Americans in this country, those images are deplorable. Juxtaposition, if one day they unearth my work and then look at my work, juxtaposition of the work painted about the African American family in the 1800s, you'll see something completely different. Cultural keeper, cultural maker. My parents got up every morning. Unfortunately, no education, but they worked hard every morning. Made only $1,000 a year, but they worked hard every morning. There was no handouts. They worked hard, picking the harvest for the wealthiest people in the nation. There are moments as a young boy, this is a self-portrait, that I could sit on that porch and think about what my future would be like. Notice the colors. Notice the shapes. Very much like Jacob Lawrence. He's a fabulous storyteller. Milton Avery for bold shapes. Matisse for extraordinary color. He loved working in complementary color. If I'm going to put this much orange in there, I'm going to put this much blue in there. If I'm going to put this much red in there, I'm going to put this much green in there. Robert Guattari. You've not seen Robert Guattari work. He's a Jewish gentleman in 1935 who literally painted sharecroppers, 1935s. J. Edgar Hoover went insane thinking about this guy. A white guy painting a black story? Stop it! So these are some of the people I followed. Once more again, still painting that African-American family. We weren't troublemakers. We were extraordinary community folks. Bold shapes. Jacob Lawrence's shape was more ragged, sharp edge. Notice how mine are more smooth and round edge. Jacob Lawrence would use black. I don't like black. Black is the absence of color. The French Impressionistic artists would say that your colors are affected by its surrounding. So there's no real white, nor is there a real black. Grandma was extraordinary. Still the African-American family. Always there. Keeping the place nice and clean. Then, when the Africans came in, we're the low country African, we're the West Africans, we came in with a craft called sweetgrass basket making. When we were working in the field to shell rice, put the rice on the basket and you shove it, and you throw it up, the wind blows away the sheaves and the rice comes back in the basket. Well, we're no longer slaves. But now we took the sweetgrass basket and we turned it into a craft. People are now getting $50,000 to $5,000 for one of these baskets. These are my family members. That's what a lot of them do. Taking the craft of the making shelling rice now into an art craft. Keeping the bright, bold colors again, because life is still somewhat sort of bleak, dark for most people who don't understand it. When I arrived in Harlem, we didn't have a radio or television down south. When I arrived in Harlem and living in those apartment buildings, blues and jazz was, everywhere in the hallway. And we think about how we battled in the 1930s and the 40s about whose music it was. Benny Goodman and Coltrane were just as good on those instruments as anyone else. Why are we battling about that? Why can't we share this music? We all contribute to it. That piece was titled Harmony. This piece is titled Bebop. So I'm thinking of Dizzy Gillespie, jazzy, more abstract. Once more again, this music played in the hallways. I do admit, this one is not quite as bright and as cheerful. This one is titled Serenade. Then I went to another series, and the series was titled The Way Life Should Have Been, as opposed to the way it was. So if you begin to think like an archaeologist, sociologist, anthropologist, psychologist, and you look at this work, we look first at the toy that they're playing with. Then we look at the Knickerbocker pants. And we look at the Buster Brown shoes. I don't know who remember Buster Brown shoes in this room, but sets us back to at least the 1940s and 50s. And then we discover, wow, would that have possibly happened with this young kid? This majority young kid with these other young boys of color? No, not in this time. Not in the Deep South. We were separated. If I'm cultural keeper, cultural maker, I am going to institute a culture the way it should have been as opposed to the way it was. I'm trying to make something happen that we can all come together and live together. We didn't go to school together in the Deep South. And this time, look at the haircuts, look at the shoes, no shoes, look at the dresses, young ladies wearing dresses. We can't help but go back to Jim Crow era. Dark sort of period in our lives, but look at the joy in this. Jim Crow era once more again. Only one water fountain in this particular piece. Back then, African Americans had their own water fountain. Can't drink from their water fountain. We couldn't use their bathroom. We couldn't go into restaurants. We couldn't go to hotels or motels. I could not walk into a shoe shop and try on a pair of shoes. You usher it back into a stock room. You take your shoes off, trace your shoe on a footprint on a brown paper bag, and then the shoe come out of the box, put it on the tracing, and ask your mother, does that shoe fit your child? Never try it on a hat. Brown paper bag on the top of your head, and then a hat on top of that. You never try it on a suit. Suit is held a foot away from you and asked, does that suit fit your child? Why not? Why couldn't we play the same part? Why couldn't we drink from the same water fountain? This particular piece is in homage to Emmett Till. This piece is called The Touch. Remember the way life should have been as opposed to the way it was. Could anyone in this room possibly tell me where the touch is? You're thinking about Emmett Till. Can anyone tell me where the touch is on this piece? Yes?
I guess the touch is just their emotional connection.
No. Emmett Till had an emotional connection, but no. So the touch is, from this angle, it looks as though that little boy's knee is touching that little girl's knee. That would be a dangerous moment for that kid. But maybe if I'd have went over here, changed my angle, I could clearly see that that kid is at least a foot away from that little girl. But a parent would see that, would think, is that kid touching my daughter's knees? That's an Emmett Till moment. And so in my image, I am trying to say, come on, why not? Why couldn't we have been in each other's yard? This particular piece also comes from the story of the way life should have been as opposed to the way it was. This suggests that these guys possibly, all of these various colors of people, possibly had lunch together. If you're an archaeologist, anthropologist, once more again, you begin to look at the dress code, 7-Up, you look, just the dress code alone puts us back in 30s and 40s. Why couldn't we work together? Why couldn't our older, wise people in our community stand on street corners and talk and plan and organize together? It's the divine spirit, for me, that causes me to want to bring the world together. It's unconditional love. This was a commission piece for New Hope Baptist Church in Portsmouth. And then as I came to the end of that particular series, this is the way it should have been. Unity. I don't know whether you could see the word unity spelled out in the back. That was the last piece of the exhibition. Why can't we be together? And as artists, we have the power to make a difference. My new series. So I've moved away from self. And I'm really looking at the world now. And I'm saying in my new series, if you think what's happening is only happening to me or my community or this campus or this country, oh no! It's happening all over the world. And that's why the pieces are circular. No parent in their right mind birth a child and say wreak havoc on the world. There is no greater love. And if mom and dad have raised a child in the appropriate way, we're going to have great leaders in the world. We're going to have great communities in the world. Homage to George Floyd. When we lynch one human being in this earth in the 20th, on this earth in the 20th century, 21st century, I know we are lynching all of us. Because as long as one person have their foot on somebody else's neck, that person whose neck they're holding down on the ground can't move, and they're the person who's applying the pressure. So we've all been affected. In this particular, when we look at children all over the country being incarcerated in immigration camps and young men, young boys in the Deep South, at the age of 13, committing crimes that warrants them life in prison. Not good. I am saying that our world leaders are in spiritual, moral decline. We cannot sit down and literally figure this out in a better way, then something is wrong. There's a biblical quote that says, the eye is the window of the soul. The eye is the window of the soul. So that's the iris, and then the pupil houses that heart of love. So this one comes from the hands up, don't shoot sort of imagery. But if we were to put the spiritual realm right in the middle of all of what's happening right now, there's nothing we cannot accomplish. Nothing we can't accomplish. This particular piece is called The Birth of a Nation. So I'm looking at a tree and its roots. And if the roots are strong and the trunk of the tree is very strong, whoops, gone. Trunk of the tree is very strong. Look at the canopy that it will produce. How are we chained together? This particular piece, how are we chained together? And it's in our hands, and I'm hoping it is chained together with love. And if you really love me, and you really respect who I am, do me a favor. Don't put me in a box. Love breaks out of a box. Takes that divine spirit once more again, that bird, just dove carrying the olive branch of peace. Yin and the yang. You look at the dove that's causing it. Can you see the dove? Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with this machine. The dove that's causing it is carrying an olive branch, a diverse olive branch, and this piece is a yin and a yang, but it's titled Embrace the Change. Let's embrace the change. Commission piece for the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail. Commission piece for the Portsmouth Children's Museum. commission piece for the Portsmouth Peace Treaty, the Japanese-Russian peace treaty that was settled in Newcastle. And that's that story. Now, how do we do all of this, Mr. Haynes? So I love the fact that we start off with an image. Image is a place to start. This is that Emmett Till piece. Image is a place to start, but it's not a place where you are going to finish. Picasso says, I design before I paint. And so as I look at a photograph, either I've taken a photograph or historically when I went through the books and read all the books that I've gone through, I find images that really move me, and I begin to design an image, taking it apart, getting rid of all the tones and looking for the simple shapes and creating shapes in the piece. And then once I have come up with a design, I then put it on a piece of paper, run it through a copy machine. And then from there, what I do is I take tracing paper, and I do use acid-free tracing paper, by the way, because every one of these artist studies is worth something. You can put a price on it. Alrighty? And so now I have my artist studies. I will probably do at least 10 of these artist studies before I come up with a color combination that I literally feel comfortable with. And normally, on this particular piece, this particular study, I literally would change it with using whiteout to change shapes, change lines, and then rework the artist study colors once more again. This is how it's all done. Who are some of my mentors? Angel Adams, who says, I preconceived the image hanging on the wall before I tripped the shutter. I'm looking at every negative, positive space around this viewfinder. Imagine him with a viewfinder, 4x5 camera, literally planning and waiting for the cloud to move across before he trips the shutter. And I am doing the same thing. I'm looking at every bit of this image around here. Edward Weston talks about that spiritual moment. Wait until the spirit of the person has perfectly settled down before he trips the shutter. Picasso says, I design before I paint. Jacob Lawrence, what a beautiful storytelling. Robin Guattari, storytelling. Catherine Clue, I think her last name is, who painted the stories of the Jewish Holocaust. Remain faithful to that story. It's the kind of thing that I do. I work full-time here at the university. This is how passionate I am about this. I work full-time at this university, and I go home in the evening, and I work full-time. Saturday and Sunday, full-time painting. Cut down a little bit early on Sunday because Monday I got to start all over again. An artist, you can sit in that northern painter, that northern light if you want to, and then hand your work off to the gallery person, or you could paint in that room, read good books on how to sell my work, so that I don't have to be a starving artist and make a fairly decent living. Ready? I would like to think that you would like to make a decent living from your craft. Last weekend, I sold 2 pieces of my work, literally for $15,000. My wife says, that will never sell for $10,000. All come all the way from Brookline, Massachusetts, and brought that painting off the wall plus another one. I just had an art collector who buys imageries or paintings or sculptures for hospitals coming to my house on the 11th of October. There's a new hospital being built here in the state, and then there's one for Dana-Farber. You have to be a business-oriented person as well. And nothing wrong with starting off in the graphic arts and then realizing that I want to then be a fine arts person. Nothing wrong with that. It's a grind. But I have a purpose in mind. I want to make a difference in the world. That's what drives me. Before I leave this earth, I want to leave something that when someone unearths what I have accomplished, they go, oh, God, this is a message. That's what drives me. Thank you. By the way, the majority of this work is all done with crayon on paper, and they can be fairly large. The circular series is acrylic paint because they're 47-inch diameters, anywhere from 30 to 47-inch diameters. Crayons, there'd be a lot of crayons to do that. So I decided not with crayon, and a beautiful pencil sharpener which keeps all the flakes up off of the floor, and life is sweet there afterwards. Then the work is then buffed with a brush and sprayed with a workable fixative to bring back its natural luster. It's also done on a 300-pound watercolor paper. It took me years to find the paper. Prior to this crayon, this used to all be cut out color-aid paper and then glued down. But then some of the glue would get on the surface, and it's stain it, and it's like yucky. So I decided crayon was it. All right, so question and answer. Hopefully I wasn't too boring, but any questions?
So, Richard, are those typical wax crayons?
Yeah, it's a Caran d'Ache oil wax base crayon.
Oil wax.
You can also get this Caran d'Ache crayon in watercolor, but museums who are collecting my work, they're saying, Richard, you need to start painting on a board. Crayon, oil, wax, good, but if it's on paper, they don't show it. They don't leave it up in a museum, for a long duration of time. So the exhibition I just had at the Courier Museum, the Underground Railroad series, sold for a huge amount of money. More than $80,000. So. But it's not all about money. It's literally about creating a craft that literally makes it different in the world. What else? Boy, my talk must, yes.
Thank you. No, it was a wonderful talk. Thank you so much. My question is so I love how you were thinking of your work in terms of what anthropologists or historians will say in the future. Will they be recovering the past of the Underground Railroad or of your history?
I would want them to think about my history. I want you to talk about me and what I had to go through. If I had more time, I would tell you more about what I went through when I was 40 years old. Imagine driving a person to a point that they don't want to live anymore. I was a day short of committing suicide. I would like you to tell that story.
Yeah, and sorry, can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
You're such an amazing storyteller. So is that part of kind of the record that you're creating? And
Yes.
have you thought of doing oral history or?
I'm doing, so my work, and I journal all the time. Edward Weston, if you've ever seen Edward Weston, 50 years of Edward Weston. 50 years of Edward Weston. This guy gets up and he writes about every photograph he is shooting and why he's shooting that photograph and how he waits for that particular moment. Ansel Adams does a lot of it too, but there's no one did it as beautifully as Edward Weston. And so I do a lot of journal because I want you to truly know me as an art historian, not speculating, but I want you to know it. Then you can go ahead and do whatever else you want with it. That's a real important thing to me. I am trying to become the best me so that I am the best in the universe. And to be artists, that's what we should all want to be. You're going deep beneath the surface. You're not doing surface work. You're literally unveiling the truth, my thoughts, what I'd like to do.
Richard, just a quick comment. I was really excited to see that you were going to speak today. And I was going to tell you this in private, but I have to actually run the class and teach.
Yeah.
So I met you maybe 12 years ago, and you came to the York Public Library. You saw one of my shows there.
Yeah.
You said, I just think you're very inspiring. You told me, I probably said it 30 times now. And you said, don't put down the brush.
Yeah.
You just kept saying it. And it's something that's really stayed with me for all those years. And I just wanted to thank you in person.
Thank you. I believe that if you have something important to do in life, how could you possibly stop? People say to me, Richard, you're 72 years. Oh, why aren't you retiring? Retiring to do what? Die? There's so much more to learn. I love hanging out with these young folks on this campus. I have no desire to retire. I'm learning too much to still give. I watched my neighbor, my next door neighbor, he passed away now at least about 7 years ago. This gentleman, 94 years old, got up every morning at 8 o'clock, didn't stop working in his yard until 6 o'clock in the evening. That man had more energy than I had. His yard was definitely prettier than mine, prettiest yard on the road. So what? There's just so much that I need to tell the world. So much the world needs to tell me. I don't want to leave yet. So, that's what art is like. I take that camera and I go out with it all the time. I take my master's degree is in photography, my bachelor's as a painter, BFA painter, MFA photographer. I've got so much to say. I'm already looking at the next series. So I'm looking at majority white American artists for 16 to 1800s who painted these beautiful yards and gardens and, with people in it and picnics. And I'm going to take those paintings that really move me and I'm going to integrate those paintings. Way life should have been. Do you realize before the Bacon Rebellion, African Americans and white lived together in the same neighborhood. We married each other as a community. Look up Jacqueline Bartolaro, The Birth of a White Nation. We lived together. We made children together. Until we wanted to enslave our community. Let's go back to that. That we can really live together. Don't put down that paintbrush.
I guess this is more of a comment, but actually, the reason why I'm here is actually because, when I went here on, to tour campus or whatever, but I remember you were, speaking, and me and my dad also went here. We, met with you, after the presentation, and, you just, started talking about your art, and I was like, I'm going here.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So,
there's great stuff happening on this campus.
Exactly.
You have to see it.
Exactly. So, and I think that our little creative pocket that we have in, PCAC, it's so compared to all the other art schools, there's something that's so special about the energy, even the creative energy, just on this campus in general. There's something just so lovely.
The DEI community that I normally do with students in January, February, a DEI mural. If you get in touch with the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office, Allison, she's recruiting students to be a part of this project already. So keep an eye on it. Well, it's wonderful being here with you all. And if you have any questions, students, I'm in Smith Hall. If you'd like to have a personal conversation with me, door is always open, always open. All right? I appreciate all of your time. Thank you all for